I'm joined by the number 2 Democrat in the Senate, Senator Dick Durbin of Illinois, the senior senator of Illinois. Good morning, Senator. Let me get your reaction right away to President Peres. You clearly saw him, heard him this morning. No ceasefire, no withdrawal now. Is that wise?
Well, it's understandable. The Israeli people, of course, have been the victims of the terrorist attacks by these Hamas rockets, which are now capable of longer ranges and more damage and bloodshed. And the Israelis want to bring an end to this. When they left the Gaza Strip, it was to try to bring peace to this area and return it to the hands of the Palestinians. And sadly, the Palestinian people have been victimized by incompetent and corrupt leadership. And at this point in time, I think the Israelis have said we have to put an end to these attacks from Gaza into Israel. A ceasefire, I hope, occurs quickly. I hope it is of a permanent and verifiable nature, but it's understandable. Israel has watched as these rockets have been launched from Gaza time and again, killing innocent people in their territory.
Okay, let me turn to the situation in your own state. Governor Blagojevich, of course, as you know, appointed Roland Burris to fill the Senate seat this week. Mr. Burris said last night he is flying to Washington tomorrow. He says he's ready to serve the people of Illinois. Have you spoken to him about what will happen when he comes to Washington this week to claim the seat he thinks is his?
Well, I've spoken to him repeatedly, and I've known Roland for over 30 years. And George, if you listen to the commentary of those of us in Illinois who know Roland Burris, no one's raised any questions about his integrity or his personal background. It's a question about the process. This governor, Rod Blagojevich, has taken the appointment of a Senate vacancy to a level no one even imagined. I mean, to think, and these words out of his own mouth from the wiretaps verify it, to think that he believed this was some sort of an auction process, that he could find some political advantage, even some resources and money coming his way if he picked the right person, has really raised a lot of questions.
But Senator, there's no evidence that the appointment of Burris himself was corrupt, and Blagojevich is the governor right now, so isn't this a legal appointment?
It is. I have to look at it in this fashion. The governor of Illinois has the state constitutional authority to fill the vacancy. The Senate of the United States has the U.S. constitutional responsibility to decide if Mr. Burris was chosen in a proper manner. And that is what we're going to do. Senator Reid has said from the beginning, and I agree with him, we have to look at this carefully because Rod Blagojevich has brought questions, raised questions by his conduct as to how this process unfolded. Not reflecting personally on Roland Burris, but to make sure that in the end, the person representing the state of Illinois, serving with me in the United States Senate, was brought to that position properly.
Back in 1996, Senator Mary Landrieu of Louisiana was elected under contested circumstances. There was an investigation of the election, but she was seated provisionally by the Republican leader of Congress at that time. Will the Democrats seat Mr. Burris provisionally as this investigation goes forward?
I don't believe that is the intention, and there's a real difference between what happened with Senator Landrieu. In her case, it was a matter of counting the votes, and that has traditionally been the reason for any election contests and recounts, as we have in Minnesota. In Illinois, sadly, because of the allegations against Governor Blagojevich, there's a question of corruption as to whether or not something was done which was entirely improper, not a question of counting the votes. So I think that's the distinction and why we're looking at this differently. There is no precedent. Nothing like this has occurred, at least in modern memory, in the U.S. Senate.
There is also the question of race. Congressman Bobby Rush, an African-American congressman from Chicago, has compared the Senate blocking Mr. Burris to some of the most notorious segregationists of the 1950s. Take a listen.
I'm talking about George Wallace, Bull Connors, and I'm sure that the U.S. Senate don't want to see themselves placed in the same position.
On top of this, you have reports in the Chicago Sun-Times that your leader in the Senate, Harry Reid, advised Governor Blagojevich not to pick African-American members of Congress like Jesse Jackson Jr., like Danny Davis. Are you concerned about a racial backlash here?
First, let me say this about the allegations against Senator Reid. It's an outrage that the Blagojevich people in the last days of their administration, facing impeachment in Springfield, are now flailing in every direction, trying to show defiance in the appointment of Roland Burris and attacking everybody in sight. Harry Reid did in this circumstance what anyone would have done as Majority Leader of the Senate. He called the governor to discuss filling the vacancy. He's done that, of course, in the states of New York and Colorado and in Delaware. It is the normal thing. I did the same. I announced in a press conference I was going to speak with the governor. But to think that this governor on his way out is now flailing in every direction, trying to attack everyone, is just plain wrong, and the people of Illinois see through it. Now, the bottom line is this. This is not about race. We are so proud in our state to have elected great African Americans. The first in our history was Roland Burris, elected statewide, and then Jesse White, our Secretary of State, and of course Barack Obama as the United States Senator. We have a proud record in the land of Lincoln of electing African American candidates to statewide office. There is no question about race. When we said at the beginning, the Democratic senators said we are not going to seat an appointment of Governor Blagojevich, it was before he'd chosen anyone, black, white, or brown. So it has nothing to do with race.
Okay, Senator, let me turn to the economic plan. President-elect Obama, of course, is going to meet with you and other congressional leaders tomorrow. Our next guest, Senator McConnell, the Republican leader of the Senate, has warned that this process should be transparent. Let me show you a little bit of what he said. He said that we hope that Democrats in Congress don't attempt to shut the American taxpayer out of this process by trying to pass a bill that hasn't been the subject of bipartisan review and that hasn't been available for public inspection. Specifically, he and other Republican leaders are calling for public hearings in the appropriate committees and for the details of this bill to be available online for the entire American public to read for a week before there's a vote. You know that President-elect Obama has promised a more transparent government. Will you accede to these demands?
I can't tell you what the particulars are. I know that Senator Reid is meeting with Senator McConnell to discuss how we will do this. The bottom line is this. Mitch McConnell and Harry Reid both know that we can't pass the economic recovery plan that this nation desperately needs without bipartisan cooperation. We've got to put aside a lot of the squabbling of the past and come together under this new administration and new leadership to get the American economy back online. We need to create good American jobs, investing in American workers. We need to have the kind of investments that will help us expand our energy opportunities. We have to make sure that we have health care investments which make it more affordable and safer for people to go to the hospital. And we have to invest in our libraries and laboratories and classrooms for the 21st century. We can work with the Republicans on this. I think there are common goals here that we can reach quickly, and we desperately need to do it. This economy is in a tenuous position.
The other big concern of Republicans and many Democrats as well is preventing a huge increase in the long-term debt of this country. What can you do to assure that there will be some kind of fiscal responsibility at the back end? For example, will you institute pay-as-you-go rules for new programs, and at what point will they take effect?
George, we're facing a terrible dilemma at this point. We have a national debt that is going to haunt future generations, and we have to deal with it. But at this moment in time, I think everyone agrees, economists, both Republican and Democratic, that we need to stimulate this economy and spend money despite this national debt, but spend it in a thoughtful way, investing in our future, making sure that the decisions we make today can be justified in the long term, investing in this country in terms of good paying jobs right here at home, in terms of our schools, our health care, and energy, so that in the long term we can say that was an investment worth the additional debt that it incurred. But to do nothing and to hold back and to be meek in our approach may have the opposite effect. Okay. We may spend a little money and not really turn this economy around, and that would be a disaster.
Okay, Senator Durbin, thanks very much for your time this morning.
Thank you, too.